Hey there, Cosmic Warriors, and welcome back to another video. Okay, so in today's video, we're going to be discussing the things that you need to know about your Saturn return. Yes, we're going to be looking at how your life will change in your late 20s and also in your late 50s. Yeah, I am going to be discussing the overly dreaded Saturn return. Now, even if you are fairly new to astrology, you've probably heard of Saturn returns, especially the first one, because it is talked about quite a bit within the astrological community. Though, what I'm interested in knowing is why do so many people find it to be scary? And it is interesting because this same attitude, it can be applied to turning 30. And it's the Saturn return that aligns with turning 30. I actually turned 30 this year myself. But yeah, I do hope that you find this video to be helpful. So on that note, let's do this. So, for those of you who do not know what a Saturn return is, well, it happens whenever Saturn returns to its natal position within your birth chart. And this takes between 28 to 31 years, around about that. And Saturn remains in one sign for about 2.5 to 3 years, so 2.5 to 3 years there. So you'll experience your first Saturn return when you're about 28, 29, and you'll experience your second Saturn return when you're about 58, 59, and you might also experience your third when you're 88 if you live that long. And you're most likely going to feel the impacts of your Saturn return the closer Saturn is to your natal Saturn. So looking at the transit Saturn there, looking at that making a conjunction to your natal Saturn. Also important to note, Saturn can retrograde back and conjunct your natal Saturn once again, and then when it goes direct again, it can hit off your natal Saturn a third time. It all depends on the degrees your natal Saturn makes in your chart and how it aligns with the Saturn transit. Also, consider what planets you have in the sign that Saturn is in. I mean, I know for me, I have Sun and Mercury in Aquarius, and then I have Saturn in Aquarius. Likewise, consider what other placements you have in your chart as you assess the movement of Saturn throughout your chart. Plus, consider aspects being made to Saturn's movement around your chart as well. Okay, so a little thing or two about the first Saturn return. As you transition into your 30s, you'll see where you have stepped up throughout your life and where you need to step up. You'll also see how you have changed, how you have grown, but also you will see what needs to be changed. You'll see what lessons you have learned so far and what you still need to learn. You will be confronted with all the things you haven't done, the mistakes you've made, the decisions you've made, and so on. What things you have outgrown and how you would like to grow, what things you would like to achieve moving forward. This stage in your life can be challenging, especially if you do not have a solid foundation, especially if you feel like you're trapped in your position. Sort of like the whole turning 30 thing, right? Our 30s are often seen as the age that we are supposed to have things figured out. We're supposed to have a car, a house, a family, a marriage, a steady career, and so on. And at the very least, we are supposed to know what we want out of life. We should have some type of stability and security. we should be successful in some way. Naturally, I am speaking as someone born in the UK, okay? I'm from Northern Ireland, but I'm sure if you're from somewhere like the USA or Canada or Australia, or even if you're from Spain or France, perhaps you can relate to what I am saying. But yes, we should be sensible and we should be responsible adults by the time we are 30. And if we do not feel like we have it all figured out by this age, well, many of us can feel stuck. You might freak out because you feel as if you're not where you think you should be. In fact, you might find that come your Saturn return, you make a drastic change. You might go back to school, you might move house, or you might change jobs, or you might leave a toxic relationship, or you might decide to go for therapy. However, the thing to keep in mind during your first Saturn return is that you're on your own unique journey, okay? You are going at your own pace. You must work with the resources that are available to you. You might not have a house by the time you're 30. You might not know what career you want to do. Yet at the same time, the Saturn return can feel like a big deal. You start to put your life into perspective, and what also comes with such an awakening is the structure of your life. And the reality here, well, is that some of us have it harder than others. Some of us don't get deposits for a house from our parents. Some of us don't get our cars or our university fees or our wedding fees or our rent paid for us by our parents or by others. Some of us don't have trust funds or inheritance money to use. There are people who are born into dysfunctional families, people who are born with a physical impairment or a learning difficulty, people who are self-reliant from a very young age. And this right here is what I think is overlooked when it comes to Saturn, okay? And what I mean by this is really the importance of limitations, the importance and the reality of restrictions, and how these things can impact our capacity to achieve and to succeed. Hard work is important. Discipline and perseverance, these things are important, but not everybody is given the same resources and opportunities in life. Life can be so difficult for many people. But the main point here is that during your Saturn return, you are confronted with these things. Now, when looking at your Saturn return, consider the sign and house that Saturn is in within your chart, okay? The placement of Saturn will show you the themes you might be dealing with when it takes place. So, for example, if Saturn is in your 4th house, themes of home and family may be brought up during your Saturn return. Or if Saturn is in your 2nd house, themes of physical security and your financial position, these things may be brought up during your Saturn return. Or if Saturn is in your 7th house, themes of your relationships and your shadow, they may be brought up during your Saturn return. Right, so let's now pull up a chart. I'm going to be using my chart to show you the movements of Saturn. But stay with me because this is going to be a little bit of a journey. Just make sure that you watch the whole video to get the most out of it. So I'm going to be using astro.com for the purpose of this tutorial today. Full credit goes to astro.com for their chart generators. So go onto astro.com and type in all of your birth information. So your time of birth, your date of birth, your place of birth, then select your name, okay, and then go to extended chart selection. Once here, select your chosen house system. I'm going to be using whole signs for the purpose of this video. You can choose whichever house system suits you. I just prefer this house system, okay? Then go to chart type and select natal chart and transits. Now, once you've done that, in this section here that I'm showing you, where it says start date, what I want you to do is to type in your date of birth. So of course I'm going to be using my chart as an example. So I'm going to put in the 8th of February 1992. And once you have successfully done that, go to click here to show the chart. Right, so looking at my chart, notice how there are planets in green around the outer wheel. These are in sync with my natal planets shown in the center. These green planets you see, they are transits. Transits can show you where the planets are currently and where they are during a certain period of time. So these natal placements in the middle, these will show you where the planets were when you were born. But the thing is that the planets will continue to move after your birth. They will move after you are born. And it's the continuing movement of the planets. Like I said, they are shown in green. Again, these are known as transits. On that note, let's get into the first Saturn square. This can take place around the time you're 8 years old, okay, about that. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to select a different date. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to type in 2000 as the chosen year. I was 8 years old. So looking at this chart, notice how all the planets in green, they've all moved around, okay? And so in the case of this chart and this specific date, notice how Saturn, it is in Taurus and I have Taurus in the 9th house. Therefore, Saturn in Taurus is transiting my 9th house. And the significant thing about this particular Saturn transit is that Saturn is making a square to my natal Saturn in Aquarius in the 6th house. Therefore, Saturn has went through its first quarter around my chart. Now, squares in astrology, they create a 90-degree angle between two or more planets. And squares also typically represent conflict, tension, and unease. And when this particular Saturn square occurs, it can show a key stage of your development. And the interesting thing here is that when we are between 8 to 10 years old, well, we are approaching adolescence. We are about to hit puberty. Now, according to the NHS UK, again, I'm from the UK, young girls typically have their first period when they are 12 years old. But for some girls, it can start earlier than that. Likewise, according to the NHS UK, girls usually start puberty before boys. It is around this time, or not so long after, that our hormones, they are going wild, they are changing us physiologically. I always get so nervous before that word because it's really hard to say. Breasts will grow, testes will grow, everything will grow. Again though, typically. But what does this have to do with Saturn? Well, Saturn is very much about maturity, growth, aging, learning lessons, boundaries, responsibility, and knowing the consequences of our actions. And so when we look at Saturn and we compare it to our first Saturn square, well, it's pretty obvious that puberty and entering into adolescence, it's not an easy task. We feel awkward, we feel uncomfortable, we feel weird and tense, we feel all of these conflicting feelings on the inside, and we feel uncomfortable with the changes that are happening here. Our peers are also experiencing these changes, which makes for heightened emotions during our early schooling years. But the thing about this is that we also need adults to guide us through such a pivotal time in our lives. We need to be taught how to address our feelings, how to manage our emotions in a healthy way. We need to be supported with security and beneficial structure. And we also need freedom to grow, freedom to explore. And if we are given these things by our parents, by our teachers, by other members of authority and so on, hopefully we can experience a much smoother process. But if we are not given these things, if we are made to feel feelings of guilt and shame for our emotions and for our feelings, then perhaps our growth and our development can feel stagnant. We do not get to blossom. Furthermore, if we do not have security and structure, again, growth can be challenging. We do not have a steady foundation. Maybe you were raised in a dysfunctional home, for example. On that note, I'm actually going to show you then what was going on for me whenever I was 9 years old. So looking at my chart, Saturn also made a square to Uranus in Aquarius, which was transiting my 6th house. And of course, that Uranus energy was hitting off my Aquarius placements at the time. And during my adolescence, I was not given the chance to explore. Religion was the authority. I had to play by the rules of religion, keeping in mind that the 9th house in astrology rules over religion. My actions had to align with God's way. And as you can imagine, these things can impact the puberty process, especially when it came to SEX-UAL feelings. I was not taught about SEX. I was taught that SEX should be saved for marriage, and I was made to believe that I should only ever have SEX with one person. And so what followed from such teachings were immense feelings of guilt and shame. So that's just my experience. And also I understand that religion can be beneficial for many people. You might have had a really positive upbringing when it came to religion, but I do hope that my experience helps explain what I mean when I say about us needing to have adults to guide us through adolescence in a healthy way. Sort of like they are creating the foundation for us. And it's this same foundation that can set us up for life, which is really interesting because Saturn is very much about foundation. I mean, you could be 40 years old while still struggling with issues that link back to your adolescence. Maybe you were rejected as a child and you still feel those feelings of rejection in your adult years. Or maybe you were neglected as a child and you still fear that others will leave you. You might even be married with children and still experiencing these feelings. Essentially here, Saturn plays such a huge role in our development. It is strongly associated with maturity, and if at any time we are not given the opportunity to grow and to mature, we can remain in this sort of stagnant place. Even something as crucial as setting boundaries, another thing Saturn represents. If we are not taught how to set boundaries, how are we supposed to set boundaries later on in life? In a way, we have to be able to teach ourselves how to set those boundaries. Now, on the other hand, perhaps it's other people that play a role when it comes to our growth and maturity. Sure, your parents might have supported you and built you up during your adolescence, but if you were bullied at school, for example, that can have long-lasting effects. If you experience some type of trauma, that can stifle your growth. Or if you were in an accident and left physically impaired, well, you do the math, okay? Same thing. Not to mention, there are some people who do not have parents, children who have lost their parents due to illness, or maybe they've been abandoned, or maybe they've been put up for adoption. Essentially here, folks, okay, the first Saturn square represents a significant stage in your life. The first Saturn quarter plays a key role in your foundation. However, with that being said, still assess the movement of Saturn through each and every sign. Each sign Saturn is in can show further stages within your development. Perhaps sextiles and trines being made to Saturn, they are a bit easier, so trines and sextiles being made to your natal Saturn. Then again, perhaps it depends on what other placements you have. Okay, so let's move on to the Saturn opposition. This can take place around about the time that you are 14 years old. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to select a different date. I'm going to fast forward another 6 years, and so I'm going to type in 2006 as the chosen year. I was 14 years old. Also, I'm going to change the month to October. And in the case of this chart and this date, notice how Saturn is in Leo and I have Leo in the 12th house. Therefore, Saturn in Leo is transiting my 12th house, and the significant thing about this particular Saturn transit is that Saturn is opposite my natal Saturn in Aquarius in the 6th house. Therefore, Saturn has went through its second quarter around my chart. It's now halfway. Now, oppositions in astrology, they create a 180 degree angle between two or more planets. And oppositions typically represent challenges. The planets involved may compete against one another. There is a push and pull effect going on. Now, when this particular Saturn opposition occurs, it can show another stage in our development. And when we are between 14 to 16 years old, some of us actually still might even have to start puberty, because some people, they start puberty a bit later. But for most of us, we have went through puberty and now we are classed as a young person, again, according to the UK. So you're still not an adult yet, but you are starting to approach adulthood. Plus, you might also be feeling the same feelings that you felt during puberty. I mean, I know for me, I was the most moodiest teenager, as are most teenagers. So with that being said, perhaps Saturn squares and Saturn oppositions, well, they represent us getting ready to transition to the next stage of our development. Still, in the case of the Saturn opposition, you aren't an adult yet, you aren't allowed to drink alcohol, you can work, but you also must stay in school, and the working hours for a 14-year-old in the UK is 12 hours a week. Children can start full-time work only if they have reached their minimum school leaving age, which is 16. Once they reach 16, by law, they must have a 30-minute break if their working day is longer than 4.5 hours. And once they turn 18, adult employment rights and rules apply. Therefore, during this Saturn opposition, you start to learn a thing or two about responsibility. Work starts to become a part of your vocabulary. Perhaps your parents urge you to think about your future or about the types of subjects you want to choose at university, or maybe your parents are on top of you, just pushing you to work hard on your exams. You start to feel all this pressure to achieve and to accomplish, this pressure to sort your life out. Then again, perhaps you felt neglected by your parents. Maybe you had to be self-sufficient, self-reliant from a very early age, and so you didn't feel like your parents really cared. Maybe your parents didn't push on you at all to get an education, or maybe you felt mentally restricted, and at the same time, you're still a young person while all of this is happening, and so you're still naive, you're still foolish. You have all of these feelings that you find difficult to manage, and you can still be reckless. Not to mention all the pressures coming from your peers, or the pressures you feel when it comes to kissing, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to your first time. And your body is still going through these changes. You might have acne, or you might feel like an ugly duckling in comparison to your peers. Perhaps you feel like you haven't come into your beauty yet, but essentially you feel all of this pressure coming at you from all angles. It's like, well, who do you want to be? You need to know now. And you're like, I don't know. Or maybe you do know. Maybe you are the type of person and you've just been so certain about your direction from an early age. Maybe you're someone who has wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer from the age of 7, and so you work hard to make these things happen. But yet, it's this stage in our lives that can feel like forever. You know how many people say that school is the best years of their life, or was the best years of their life? Yeah, I don't think that. I could not wait to leave school. But at the same time, I realized that those years, they meant less responsibility. And when we grow older, the responsibility grows bigger and bigger. On the other hand, there are some of us who felt immense responsibility as children or as teenagers. Some of us were made to clean, to cook, to look after our parents, to be the responsible ones. And then later on in life, we grow to resent responsibility because we didn't get to be carefree. We didn't get to have fun. Again, looking at my own chart as an example, I was 14 years old, okay, and Saturn was opposite Neptune in Aquarius, and Neptune was transiting my 6th house. And during my teenage years, I spent a lot of time alone. I would go into my bedroom and put on my music. I would imagine a better life. I would dream of the perfect lover, someone who would rescue me, someone who could relate. I dreamt of being on stage. I dreamt of dancing, singing, being in music videos. I had all of these Disney Channel stars plastered all over my walls. I just really wanted to be famous, and I dreamt of being like a Disney star one day. Throughout high school, I would get on stage, but I was also really, really shy. I was very, very shy around other people. I can still be quite shy around other people today, but still, my mind seemed to be my place of escape, okay? Escaping into my mind was actually how I coped, and when I look back, it feels as if my teenage years were taken from me, as if I didn't really get to fully enjoy and embrace that stage of my life. Still, however, I think I lived in my own world, and I didn't really think about having a family or setting up a home. You know how there's people who just know from a young age they want to have children one day? That was not me. I think during that stage in my life, I was happy enough to escape. I was happy enough just to run away. I still had education and cleaning responsibilities, but there was just so much chaos happening within my life that I felt overwhelmed. I kept my head down and I studied. My parents urged me to study. They really wanted me to get an education. Whoa, I did not realize how therapeutic this video would be, how personal I would get. Again though, that was my experience. Maybe you can relate, or maybe your experiences were very different. Basically, when it comes to the Saturn opposition, you start to see what is expected of you, what responsibilities you have, what pressures you feel, what you feel obligated to do, what your duty is as a teenager transitioning towards adulthood, okay? You know that it's coming up. And it is this stage that is pretty crucial, because an education, for example, that is what you need if you are to get a job. At least that is what we are taught in school. We are taught that getting a degree means having a higher earning salary or more opportunities. Yet, it's not actually as black and white as this. However, in the UK, it is important to have at least a C in English and Maths. These grades are necessary when it comes to most jobs. Still, however, when it comes to university, many people decide not to get a degree and instead they enter full-time work after high school. Others might go on to college after high school, and if they failed their English and Maths in school, they have another opportunity to retake these subjects at college. Okay, so let's move on to the third quarter, the second Saturn square. This typically takes place by the time you're about 20 years old or so. And so on that note, I'm going to go back and I'm going to select a different date. I'm going to fast forward another 6 years. So I'm going to type in 2012 as the chosen year. So that's October 8th, 2012. I was 20 years old. In the case of my chart and this date, notice how Saturn is in Scorpio and I have Scorpio in the 3rd house. Therefore, Saturn in Scorpio is transiting my 3rd house. And the thing to keep in mind with Saturn here is it squares my natal Saturn once again. Therefore, Saturn has went through its 3rd quarter around my chart. Again, squares in astrology create a 90-degree angle between 2 or more planets, and squares also typically represent conflict, tension, and unease, okay? So, here we have another key stage in our development. We have just entered adulthood at the age of 18. In the UK, Australia, and many European countries, you can legally drink alcohol. In Canada, you can legally drink alcohol by 19, and in the USA, you have to wait until you're 21. But focusing on the UK, you still have to wait until you're 21 to adopt a child or to supervise a learner driver. You also have to be 21 to apply for a bus license or a lorry license. Furthermore, you can legally have sex. You can watch an over 18 movie. You can gamble. You can apply for credit cards. You can get a tattoo. Notice how our accessibility to things increases as we age. This is because we mature. Our understanding and awareness of things increases. We begin to understand the consequences of our actions. We also manage our actions and emotions much better. The older we become, the more responsible of ourselves we become, or at least that is what is expected of us. It is also between 21 to 22 that students graduate from university in the UK. Same thing when it comes to the USA, Canada, and Australia, and so on. Off into the big bad world we go with all of these hopes and dreams and aspirations. Some people decide to head off traveling before jumping into full-time work. Other people already have a job waiting for them after they graduate. Others decide to get a master's degree, or they decide to further their education even more. Many people even decide not to go to university at all. They enter into full-time work as soon as they leave high school. Then there are those who take a gap year and they travel, and then they go to further their education. Essentially, this Saturn square represents another transitional moment. Now, there are people who have a romantic partner by this age who then becomes a lifelong partner. And then there are people who are single and have no idea what the future holds romantically. There are people who know deep down in their soul that they want to have children in their 20s. Then there are people who don't want to have children at all. Then there are people who don't even have a clue about what they want. They feel somewhat confused or stuck. They feel directionless and unsure of their path. On the other hand, there are people who do not have an education. There are people who are not stable enough or well enough to direct their life in a particular way. It could be due to an addiction, due to a psychologically poor upbringing, or due to a physical concern. There are people who aren't given a fighting chance to make something of themselves. Remember when I mentioned foundation in association with Saturn and the first Saturn square? The foundation for some people is a rocky one. They might have to try harder, or they might have to wait longer, or they might have to take on more responsibilities, like to do things on their own, which can be very difficult. Or they might have certain obstacles in their way that they can literally never overcome. It is physically impossible for them. And I'm not going to sit here and say that anything is possible, because that's not true. However, this also leads me on to the question of, well, what is success? Or better still, what is true happiness? When it comes to Saturn energy, it's very much about climbing to the top of your personal success ladder. It's about being ambitious, being a go-getter, being a hard worker. And yes, all of these things matter. It's great to achieve the things that we work for. It's great to feel that sense of accomplishment. But what if Saturn also taught us that being content and happy with less is also somewhat successful? Maybe there are people in this world, particularly in the West, who actually choose not to chase money or fame or career goals. Or maybe there are people who are satisfied with what they have and everything else after that is a bonus. Or maybe there are people who genuinely are struggling and it's hard for them to achieve the things they want. Yet, it's the second Saturn square that can represent this moment where we see our whole life ahead of us and we think, I need to achieve as much as I possibly can if I am to be deemed as successful. Or it can be a moment where we see all the things that are limiting us, blocking us from achieving. Okay, so back to my chart as an example. I was 20 years old. Saturn was in conjunct Uranus and Aries, which was transiting my 8th house. And when I was 20, I was living in the USA. I was doing a placement year, which was part of my university degree. I was also in a very unhealthy relationship. I was not happy during this stage of my life. You know how I said in the previous stage that I wanted to escape? Yeah, I went to some pretty extreme lengths in order to do that. But by the time I graduated from university in 2013, I wanted to travel again. I just wanted to get away. But I think looking back, I was running away from myself. I was running away from deeper underlying issues. Now, by the time Saturn entered into Sagittarius, to my surprise, I discovered astrology, and it was just like something clicked. It started off as a hobby, but after some time, I knew that I wanted to pursue it as a career. But the thing is, of course, is that astrology did not solve my emotional problems. Traveling did not solve my emotional problems. Astrology has been a great tool. I've been able to become more aware of myself. I've also been able to grow and mature. But I've also had to address the really heavy stuff with a professional. I guess you could say that this Saturn square was a really tough one, especially emotionally. But fast forward to the Saturn return, folks, okay? You're about to turn 30. And you are confronted with all those things that I talked about at the beginning. Things like success and accomplishment, things like security and stability. You're faced with your mistakes and with further restrictions. And right now, as I'm recording this, I'm going through my Saturn return. I have Saturn in Aquarius in the 6th house. Saturn entered Aquarius when I was 28 and it will leave when I'm 31. But by the end of 2021, Saturn returned to its natal position in my chart, and it has been passing over my Mercury and Sun throughout 2022. And this year, like I said, I turned 30. And so far, I've been thinking heavily about work and about my health, especially my mental health. And I've also been thinking about my physical health. I know that I want to work out again. I want to get back into fitness, but not as intensely and as obsessively as I did whenever I was younger. I want to enjoy the process of fitness and diet. I don't want to feel chained to it. Furthermore, I've been thinking about the future of my profession, about the future of my time here on YouTube. I've been thinking about the longevity as an astrologer. I've been thinking about furthering my education so I can progress more as an astrologer. Moreover, I started group psychotherapy at the beginning of 2020. I moved in with my partner that same year. There are other adult-like things on my mind, like children and marriage and having a house and so on. Perhaps these are all aspirations of mine, but I'm also ridden with doubt because I think, well, what if these things aren't a part of my plan? What if these things don't work out? But I think for me, what is important is working on my deeper issues, working on these worries and stresses themselves. Thinking about why I'm so afraid. Or maybe it's about realizing how much pressure I put on myself. And to be honest, there is this deep insecurity within me. It is my inner world that is impacting my hopes and my wishes for the future. Moreover, confidence and self-assurance are big topics that come up for me within psychotherapy. Keeping in mind that Saturn opposes Chiron in my 12th house in my chart. And I also have fears that I will never become a mother. So there's some emotional things to address. Essentially, my Saturn return so far has been associated with inner security and physical security. And people in my therapy group, they have been helping me. We have all been helping and supporting each other. They act as mirrors and I act as a mirror towards them. Through therapy, I've been unraveling the past, looking at my traumas, trying to understand why I feel blocked and why I feel limited. Saturn will remain in Aquarius until 2023, so I still have a few more lessons to learn during this cycle, but this is where I stand right now. Again, this is about reflecting upon your own experiences. If you do want to share your experiences, feel free to do so in the comment section. But essentially, during your Saturn return, you will most likely start to think about the structure of your life. You may start to think about the mistakes you've made, the decisions that you have made. And then you may seek to create some type of change within your life. You may feel this sort of calling to step up and to take responsibility. Now, you will also experience 2 more Saturn squares, as well as a Saturn opposition between your first and second Saturn returns. So using myself just as an example, by 2030, I will experience another Saturn square and I'll be 38 years old. Therefore, I will be transitioning into my 40s. Then the next Saturn opposition for me will be in 2036. And so I will be 44 years old, and so I'll be approaching menopause. And then in 2042, during my next Saturn square, I will be about 50. And eventually, hopefully, if I live that long, I will experience my second Saturn return. This will take place around 2050 and I will be 58 years old. So 30 years after my first Saturn return, I will experience my second, as will we all. And the significant thing about the second Saturn return is that we are approaching our 60s. And throughout our 60s, many of us are preparing for retirement. Now, keeping in mind that the average retirement age used to be a lot less back in the day, and the full retirement age is to increase from 65 to 67 years old by 2023. And in the UK, the state pension age is currently 66. And in many other countries, the retirement age has increased. Still, it's during the second Saturn return and beyond that many of us start to slow down. Now, however, I'm also not suggesting that by 60, we all stop working and we no longer have goals, we no longer have ambitions. There are people who might even kickstart a new career in their 50s, or perhaps their hard work finally pays off and so they come into a good bit of money. There are people who are quite fit and active. Perhaps you become a grandparent around this time, and so you enjoy those moments with your grandchildren. You really cherish those moments. And if you aren't working, even better. Many people also, they decide to travel during this time. They decide to use this time to their advantage. Other people may decide to buy a holiday home somewhere. And so they visit it during the summer months and then they return during the colder months. Basically, there are plenty of opportunities available, but there are still different restrictions and limitations to take into consideration. Moreover, the older we become, the more we tend to question how we have chosen to live our lives. We may have regrets. We may wish we could go back. We may worry about what comes after death. The older we become also, the more people leave. We are greeted with the reality that everybody dies, our friends, our family, our spouse, and so on. Now, these feelings, of course, I'm sure they can be painful. Then again, perhaps many people experience a type of acceptance at the same time. Then again, perhaps retirement age can also be seen as such a wonderful time. You know, you're finally at a time where you don't have to be so consumed by work anymore. Furthermore, perhaps the opportunities available to you during this time, well, it depends upon how you have chosen to live your life throughout your 20s and 30s and so on. So for example, if you have a poor diet throughout your 20s and 30s, or if you haven't exercised, or if you haven't taken care of your physical health, you can't expect to be in amazing shape in your 50s. You can always decide to take care of your health in your 50s, but it's obviously easier to do when you're younger, typically. Or another example, if you aren't very good with handling money throughout your 20s and 30s, etc., you may not be as wealthy in your 50s. Or if you are reckless when it comes to relationships, it might be harder to find a steady partner because maybe many people are married off already, for example. Now, this is not to say, of course, that that you can't turn things around, okay? That turning things around, it's an impossible thing. I'm simply saying that our chances and our opportunities, they're slimmer. Now, at the same time, I'm not saying these things to shame people. We all go at our own pace. It's not a race. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to get things wrong or to not get things right the first time. And the thing about Saturn is that it's associated with learning from our mistakes. It's about taking responsibility if we want to make a change in our lives. And sometimes we're going to fall. We're going to fail. Still, should a divorcee feel ashamed that their marriage failed? Should a business owner feel ashamed that their business fell through? Perhaps there is a certain amount of accountability on these people's parts. I mean, for example, if the divorcee was horrible to their spouse, or maybe the business owner didn't plan very well. But to walk around with this continuous shame, with these feelings of shame, to believe that everything is your fault and you should have known better, to look at oneself as a failure, I don't think that's healthy. Yes, these people might have failed in some way, but failure can also lead to change, to learning more, to doing better, to improvement, to growth, maturity. And besides, the partner of the spouse also played a role within that relationship. And the financial climate of the business, so looking at that business owner, well, that financial climate also played a role. See, when we fail at something, we blame ourselves. It is entirely our fault. But what if we could see that there are other factors to consider? Maybe we wouldn't be so hard on ourselves. Essentially, the second Saturn return is another moment in our lives where we put our lives into perspective. We address the structure of our lives once again. Now, you might also experience a third Saturn return at about 88 years old. And if you live until you're 90, whoa, what a big deal that is. And interestingly, if you live until you're 100 in the UK, you actually get a birthday message from the Queen. So there's an interesting fact. And according to a statistic, 1 in 5 girls born in Britain are now expected to reach the age of 100. Would I like to live until I'm 100? Well, I think it depends on my mobility and my health and my relationships at the time. Though, on that note, I want to know, would you like to live until you're 100? If you've made it to the end of this video, let us know in the comment section. Basically, aging is inevitable, and perhaps Saturn returns are often viewed as scary due to our own fears and insecurities that create these feelings. It's the pressure we put on ourselves to be at a certain point in our lives by a certain age. But at the same time, maybe it's aging and growing up and maturity that makes us realize how much time we actually have on this earth. And it's really not much. The older we become, realistically, the less opportunities we have. But does that mean we should stay put and never branch out? Well, I guess it depends on yourself. It's for you to decide. It is dependent upon where you are at. Remember, you're on your own path. You go at your own pace, and you work with whatever tools you have. Okay then, Cosmic Warriors, so that concludes my video talking about all the things that you need to know about your Saturn return. So looking at how your life will change in your late 20s and late 50s. Now, I do hope that I was able to explain things in a helpful and understandable way. Please let me know if I did. And let us know about your own Saturn return experiences down below. But overall, just let us know your thoughts and your opinions on today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. And of course, if you would like to see more videos from myself and you have not yet subscribed, then make sure that you click that subscribe button and also give this video a like if you did like it. And I will be back with another video very, very soon.